Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, NBA reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another live show. Just got back from Madison Square Garden, where the Lakers fell 112 to 100 to drop to 4-3 on their 8-game road trip. They are now 29-19 overall. They briefly fell to number 7 in the West, but with Phoenix losing tonight to the Clippers, they jump back up to number 6. A disappointing one-year anniversary of the Luka Doncic trade for the Lakers. They still have some time here to potentially make another blockbuster trade before the clock strikes midnight. Technically, it was after midnight Eastern time, so they have about an hour here to make another big move, and if they don't, it will be a bit of a disappointing one-year anniversary just because LA, go back 12 months, and LA just beat the Knicks in one of their best wins of the season. Up to that point, they did it without Anthony Davis. LeBron had one of his best games up to that point in the season. Max Christie just continuing his play as a starter. DFS had a big game, and then a couple hours later, they trade for Luka, and everything changes. 12 months later, not as fulfilling of an evening with LA falling by 12 and really having a rough second half that I think exposed some of the flaws that we knew this group already had, and I think puts the Lakers at a bit of a crossroads at the trade deadline here. We're less than 4 days away from the deadline, about 3.5 days here, and the Lakers have some big decisions to make in terms of the future of this season, as well as the future of the franchise going into next season, the following season. They have to map this out properly and make sure they are approaching it with the correct lens, I would say. But shout out to the chat, shout out to the late night gang. Appreciate everybody tuning in. And yeah, I mean, let's get into the game. To be completely honest, I'm not going to focus too much on the game outside of the notable performers section. Everything else is going to be some big picture conversation in terms of the state of the team right now, looking at the zone defense and some of the changes with LA's defensive scheme recently, and then also looking at some of the trade deadline fallout and what I think the first couple moves of the deadline potentially mean for the Lakers. So Buha's big picture is LA approaches this trade deadline at a crossroads. And what I mean by that is this is clearly a good team. And I feel like I've made this point several times throughout the season, but I'm going to continue to beat this drum in terms of this is a good team. This is clearly a good team. They are still on pace to win around 50 games. I think they're going to win 50 games again for the second straight season. 50 wins this year compared to 50 wins last year is not going to get them a top 3 seed in the West. It seems like the top 3 to 4 seeds in the West, you're probably going to need low to mid 50s. And I think that the top of the West is better this year. The depth of the Western Conference is better this year. So 50 wins might be the 5 seed, could be the 6 seed, could even be the 7 seed potentially. So they are going to be in that mix as things project right now. But this is clearly a good team, regardless. Like, we could look at the net rating, we could look at the point differential, we could look at the record against teams above 500. And yes, there are flaws and shortcomings and blemishes. This is a good team. However, as we saw tonight, and as we've seen consistently throughout this road trip, throughout, I would say, the last couple months, really starting in that like late November, early December range, when we started to get a clearer picture of this team once LeBron returned and we started to see what this team could be when closer to full strength. There are a couple of just blatant flaws here that I don't see how this group can navigate without a trade or frankly trades, plural. I think they probably need a couple moves. And chief among them to me is the Lakers' best offensive role players are too inconsistent defensively. I'm looking at guys like Rui Hachimura and DeAndre Ayton and Jackson Hayes. and their best defensive role players are too inconsistent offensively. I'm looking at Marcus Smart and Jake LaRavia and Jared Vanderbilt, and that just creates this nightly imbalance with some of the lineups where JJ really has to find and I think that the lineups have been trending, the lineups in rotation have been trending in the right direction. And I think JJ has started to settle into more appropriate roles for players. But it's like, it's been this way all season where it is a seesaw, and you put too much offense out there, they can't defend. You put too much defense out there, they can't score. And there are nights where the offensive minded guys maybe defend a little bit better. There are nights the defensive guys make shots, but those nights are few and far between. And it has really created this dilemma where JJ has to be very particular with the lineups that he plays. And if someone's just not playing well that night, and that's like assuming baseline level production and performance from everybody, but if someone's not playing well, or someone gets injured, someone gets in foul trouble, it just throws everything out of whack. And we've really seen like taking one guy out of the top 9 really throws everything out of whack, because this team doesn't really have the back end depth and the back end roster talent to replace those guys. And I'm more so looking at this through the lens of them against good teams, right? Because they can beat Washington by 30. They can beat Dallas, right? Like they'll probably beat the Nets on Tuesday. They can beat those teams, but those are not the teams we are ultimately judging them against. If we are looking at this team in terms of what they can do in April and May, and hopefully for them June, it's got to be how do they fare against the playoff level teams, the teams that they potentially have to go on the road and play, right, in round one, especially if they end up being a 5, 6, or 7 seed. They're going to start the first round on the road. And that's where I think the shortcomings of the role players are really at the foreground. And to me, that was the story of the night tonight, where just looking at, I mean, we could look at the 3-point shooting. Both teams attempted 42 threes. The Knicks hit 18 of them. The Lakers hit 12. That's a 6 3-point make gap there. So plus 18 at the 3-point line for the Knicks. And that's also a big percentage gap there, 43% for the Knicks. That's an elite percentage. 29% for the Lakers. That is a bad percentage from 3. But if we look more specifically at, I think tonight it was more so the defensive guys who could not make shots and make plays offensively. If you look at the combination of Jake LaRavia, Marcus Smart, and Jared Vanderbilt, who I think we can all agree are the Lakers' 3 best perimeter defenders, those guys combined to go 4 for 20 from the floor, which is 20%. And that's before even mentioning threes, where they went 2 for 13. I'm not gonna do the math on that, but I know it's bad. It is under 20% on threes, right? So that's just below the line of LA being able to compete with a good team like the Knicks. To me, coming into tonight, this was probably a battle of who I view as the 6th and 7th best teams in the NBA, with the Knicks being 6th, the Lakers being 7th. And there was a bit of a gap there. And it is worth mentioning, no Austin Reaves. He was not able to make his return tonight. Lakers were on the 7th game of an 8-game road trip. They've played a lot of games over the past 3 weeks or so. So there probably is a level of fatigue and attrition based on where they're at physically and mentally right now. But the Knicks have not been playing like the best basketball lately. I mean, they have won 5 in a row, but before that they had lost 4 in a row. Before that, they'd split some games and then lost another 4 in a row before that. So like technically, yes, in the short term they are playing much better. But if you go back like the last 3 weeks or so, the Knicks are below 500 and just had a pretty rough January. So like the Knicks are not even at the level necessarily that the Lakers need to get to advance in the West, but you could certainly put them in that conversation. I think they're on a similar tier as Houston or Minnesota or even the Lakers. But we saw, like, on the flip side, you have OG Anunoby pop. And I know OG Anunoby is obviously at a different tier than a Marcus Smart or a Jake LaRavia, but you have Josh Hart, who's not That's a guy that the Lakers were helping off of. They helped off of him last year in this game on February 1st, and they had some success putting big men on him and just sort of ignoring him. You have off the bench, Landry Shamet hit 6 threes. A lot of them were wide open. Tyler Kolek comes in and hits a couple threes. Diawara hits 3. So there was just a big gap in terms of the role player performance tonight, the shot making. And I don't want to simplify the analysis to just that, but on some level, it was as basic as the Knicks. I do think they generated more open looks and higher quality looks than the Lakers, but they were able to capitalize at a much higher rate. The Lakers, Luka and LeBron, generated a bunch of good looks for their teammates. They did not make them. And it's not to say that Luka and LeBron were perfect tonight. Although Luka, 30 points, 15 rebounds, 8 assists, had a pretty good game, only 3 turnovers, though was 10 for 23 from the floor. So, a sub 50% shooting game for him. LeBron, 22, 5 and 6, 9 to 15 shooting. I thought defensively had some pretty rough stretches and moments, but like those guys showed up to a degree offensively, right? And I think 52 points, 14 assists, 20 rebounds. Like you're going to take that from those two guys combined, but just about everybody else, I don't think was quite up to the level that the Lakers needed them to be at tonight. And to me, this is just a fatal flaw with this group that I think as constructed and with the way things are trending, the Lakers look like a team that's probably going to lose in round 1. And maybe they get an advantageous matchup. Maybe they get a situation where it's a bad defense and they're able to exploit it, or maybe the team suffers a second half injury or an injury in the series, and like the Lakers somehow advance to round 2. Maybe Luka is just that great where Luka can carry the Lakers against a better team and get them to advance. I don't see how they advance past round 2 with this current group. And that's where I think they're at a crossroads, because if the plan at the deadline in the next 60 hours or so is just put Gabe Vincent, Maxi Kleba, Dalton Connect, and a second on the table and see what you can get for that. Maybe even put some of these unappealing pick swaps on the table and also try to not take back any money. If they're operating under those two things of like, those are the only guys and assets they're willing to trade realistically, and they're not looking to take back money, it's just such a small pool of players that are even really available to them, and very few players that will actually make any semblance of an impact, and likely make a small impact, not a big impact. So I just think they have to figure out in the next 60 hours or so what they're actually willing to trade, how much they're willing to invest in this group, how they actually feel about this group. Because if they stand pat or they make a small move, I just don't really see that. Like even upgrading the Gabe Vincent spot, sure, there are better players than Gabe Vincent, but is that going to make over the Lakers rotation? Is that going to all of a sudden have Marcus and Jake and Vando start making open shots? Is that all of a sudden going to have the defensive awareness with DeAndre and Rui increase somehow, and the motor with those guys increase somehow? Like, no, the answer is no, right? So they can upgrade the spot, and maybe they're even able to cobble those contracts together and get a notable rotation upgrade. But even one player, especially for that, like if you're putting Rui on the table, if you're putting the first on the table, it's a different conversation. I think you could get to a different class of player. If you're just putting Gabe, Maxi, Dalton in a second, especially with the last couple trades we just saw happen, I don't really see this stud player coming into the rotation that changes everything for LA. So I think there are legitimate reasons to stand pat or to make a small move only for an expiring contract. It does give the Lakers some flexibility in the offseason to either do a bigger trade or potentially sign players in free agency. But you have to nail that then. Like if they do not make a move or they only make a small move, you have to nail the offseason. There is no excuse to not nail the offseason. And unfortunately, I mean, I've belabored this point before, this group has not made an offseason trade over the past 3 off seasons. So them actually making a move in the offseason would be bucking their recent trends. They've sat out 4 of the past 5 trade cycles. It's just like they could keep kicking the can down the road and selling the fan base on future hope, but like it just, that has not been how they have actually operated or what's really materialized. Like they had a great 2024, 25 trade cycle in season with the DFS trade and the Luka trade, of course. But outside of that, it has just been not trading at all and continuing to talk about the future and the picks they'll have, the optionality they'll have, the flexibility they'll have. And it hasn't really materialized into much. So I think if that's the path they go, then that to me is a sign they don't really believe in this roster as a championship contender. It does put a ceiling on this roster. I think they'll probably lose in round 1 or potentially at round 2 at the farthest. And I just think it's pretty much a death knell on the season, right? Like I don't think there's any way around it. It's like, even if they had Austin tonight, I think the offense is better, but that does not mean they're closing out at the 3-point line. That does not mean they're necessarily rebounding better. Like, yes, he takes the Gabe minutes. He probably takes collectively some of the defensive minutes or some of the minutes from the defensive guys in terms of Marcus and Jake and Vando and Rui to some degree, right? Like I think all those guys lose a few minutes and collectively that adds up to Austin. But then you're also talking about like the defense not being as strong. Like the defense has in part been stronger because LA has leaned into Marcus and Jake and Vando here. You take those guys out or you reduce it, then the defense isn't as strong. So you're potentially improving the offense and decreasing the defensive capabilities out there because like those guys are at the center of LA's best defensive lineups, best defensive stretches. They're not doing it with the old starters or some of the offensive guys, right? Like those guys can look better next to those guys, but they need 2 to 3 defenders out there to some degree to help, I think, contain the ball and rotate and generate steals and deflections. And so to conclude here, like I just think LA is at an interesting crossroads and they have some really important decisions to make because I think we've seen enough. Like LA is now 4-3 on this road trip, and the 3 best teams they played, they've all lost to: the Clippers, the Cavs, and the Knicks. And they are now 9-11 against teams above 500, which if you look at the top 6 in the West is the worst record among those top 6. And Minnesota's just they're 11-13, so they're just ahead of them by mere percentage points. So if you put Minnesota and the Lakers basically tied in their own tier, the top 4 in the West, they're all 4 games or better above 500 against above 500 teams. And that's a big gap, right? So LA is at least 6 games or more behind those teams in terms of record against above 500. And already they have lost convincingly to OKC and to Houston and to San Antonio a couple times when San Antonio was closer to full strength. So it's just, I think as constructed, they're good, but they're not good enough. And it's on the front office and ownership and just the organization to decide here in the next 60 hours what they want to do. And is good enough for them maybe this season? And the plan is to approach it in the offseason and swing for Giannis or swing for another star that becomes available, swing for another high-level starter. Okay, but you better go get that player. If you don't get that play, if you don't make a move or you make a small move and you don't get that player or players, whatever, in the offseason, you just run it back with this group, then I think that is a complete failure in terms of the 2 trade cycles. And I think would just be a real mismanagement of the first 18 months of Luka Doncic's tenure as a Laker. Now to pivot back to the game, no easy pivot out of that. Luka, 30, 15, and 8, 10 for 23 shooting. So 5 for 14 on threes, was not as efficient inside the arc or outside the arc, was just 4 for 9 on twos, 5 for 14 on threes. I think the Knicks have OG Anunoby got a lot of time against him. Josh Hart, the Knicks have really good perimeter defenders. And I thought Luka generated some pretty good looks tonight that just didn't fall. He's been in a great rhythm lately, so I don't want to overreact or overanalyze that. I thought a couple of the threes were questionable, but he also started hitting threes early. So once he gets going, it's hard to critique or criticize the shot selection, right? I think for me, at least, it's more so he starts the game 0 for 2, 0 for 3 on threes, and then continues taking the step backs. That's where I have more of an issue with it. But 5 for 14, you obviously like to see that a little bit more efficient. I mean, I guess it's around league average-ish, but still would like to see it. I don't know, maybe 6 threes. We're splitting hairs there. He was not the issue, though. Like Luka, I mean, he should have had a triple-double tonight, 8 assists. I assume his assist opportunities would have been closer to at least 14, 15, almost double his assist output. So he generated a lot of good looks for teammates tonight that just, they were not able to convert. Mentioned LeBron, 22, 5 and 6, 1 steal, 9 for 15 shooting, 2 for 6 on threes, just 2 for 6 on free throws. He missed a bunch of free throws tonight. Also, I thought defensively in the zone, I'm going to touch on the zone, so I don't want to spoil it, but I thought the Lakers stayed in the zone far too long, and I don't love the zone with this starting group in particular, because I think, especially once they put Rui in there, having LeBron, DA, and Rui as because they subbed Rui in early in the third. Jake missed a couple of open shots, and clearly they wanted to put Rui in as a better shooter. But then having Rui, LeBron, and DA as the backline, I thought was pretty problematic in terms of motor and second efforts, and there were some over rotations. Like there was one play where it was LeBron's rotation. He rotates over. Rui leaves the strong side shooter and rotates over. That leads to, I forgot if it was Kolik or Shamit for 3. LeBron chews into him after that. It was like too many breakdowns like that. And LeBron was certainly a part of it. And I don't think tonight had the same juice defensively. And I know Crane just was tweeting out some of his recent numbers. It is worth noting, and I should have probably noted this earlier on, LeBron was named to the All-Star team, 22nd, record 22nd straight appearance. And I know there's a lot of discussion right now about whether he deserves it or not. I think even if he was not named with the injury situation, it's likely Giannis is going to miss it, but there's still a possibility. We got 2 weeks till the All-Star game. I think they're going to find a way to get LeBron on. So now I think it just is a matter of who they choose to replace Giannis. I would assume it's Şengün because it's an international player. And technically the conferences don't really matter for that. But we'll see who they end up replacing Giannis with. And then I would assume another player too ends up not playing. For the record, I think Kawhi and Şengün were the 2 biggest snubs. I thought both guys were... I think both guys were on my all-star reserve list with Trevor, but I thought LeBron was going to. I had LeBron making it as a replacement. Trevor had him making it as a reserve. So I thought LeBron was going to be on it either way. Then the rest of the group, it's pretty grim. I thought DA started the game off well, had a couple of quick buckets, did have a double-digit scoring performance with 13 points on 6 for 6 shooting. I thought had a rough defensive game. They were switching him onto New York's wings, and they were just beating him off the dribble, whether it was OG or Josh Hart or Mikal Bridges. I thought his switch containment was not up to par, and actually 4 of his 5 rebounds were offensive rebounds, which on the one hand, great. 4 offensive rebounds is awesome. On the other hand, 1 defensive rebound in a game he played 32 minutes. That, I thought Mitchell Robinson came in and pushed him around and got the better of him. I thought Cat got the better of him in the second half and was able to score on him, take him off the dribble a little bit. So I think offensively, DA continues to be efficient, and you do see an increase in his engagement when he's involved early, but him grabbing 5 rebounds in 32 minutes, that's just too few. He needs to grab more. And I also thought the defense was not up to par. So I wouldn't quite say this is the level of dud he's had against some good teams recently. I thought it was like slightly better or maybe even notably better, but I would still say clearly a below average game for DA and not up to the level that the Lakers need from him against this caliber of opponent. Jake and Marcus, I already mentioned them, but they combined to shoot 4 for 16, 2 for 10 on threes, both missed a bunch of open looks. Marcus, after I thought like not calling his number recently at like an appropriate level, started to call his own number and force shots on drives, and maybe a couple of those you could argue he got fouled on and didn't get a call, but that's just how the game went. I thought defensively both guys competed really well, and I thought Marcus, he forced a shot clock violation. He had some really good defensive moments. Jake, as the primary guy on Brunson with the starting group, they were fluctuating between Jake and Marcus. I thought he had some good defensive moments, had a steal, had a block, but only a couple rebounds for Jake, 0 rebounds for Marcus. Marcus, they combined for 5 assists, but just the Lakers need more from those guys, right? Like they don't need 15 points, they don't need 20 points, but for those guys to combine for 12 points on 4 for 16 shooting, it's just not good enough. And that has been a trend with both players in terms of the offensive inconsistency and having the really good offensive games and shooting performances, and then following that up with performances like this. And both players are low 30%, low 30s catch and shoot guys right now. And the Lakers need better from both of them. They need that to stabilize as mid 30s, if not high 30s, ideally. Off the bench, Rui had a hot start, then cooled off a bit. Finished with 11 points, 5 of 11 shooting, just 1 for 5 on threes, had some really good looks that he didn't hit. So he is sort of, after the Bulls game, he's cooled off a little bit since then. Vando, I thought, had some really good defensive moments, but hit the side of the backboard twice on open threes. This was a game where I thought you really felt Vando's offensive limitations and inability to make a team pay for ignoring him. Only a couple rebounds too. So I thought he was solid. His defense against Brunson, I think that the biggest bright spot was LA held Brunson to 12 points on 4 for 15 shooting. And he did have 13 assists. They made him into much more of a playmaker than a scorer. But a big part of that was Vando pressuring him full court sometimes, picking him up at half court, and the length and the anticipation, didn't necessarily materialize that much with only 1 steal, but I thought Vando was very impactful on the ball. Off the ball, he got backdoored. He gets backdoored a lot, and off the ball defense can be because he gambles and lunges in a lot. Got the counter to that obviously is to use that aggression against him, and especially when he's not at the top of the zone or he's not guarding around the 3-point arc, when he's baseline and when he's in the corner or when he's the low man, his awareness can be pretty rough sometimes. And there were several times he got backdoored for cuts or offensive rebounds or whatnot. And that's an area he can certainly improve on in terms of I think he almost gets locked in too much on the ball. That's great when he's actually on the ball, but when he's off the ball, it's got to be ball and man and being aware of cutters behind you. Gabe came in, hit a couple threes. I think continues to be a bit of a defensive liability, and the fact that in theory this is a matchup you'd want to put him on Brunson just because Gabe is supposed to be a point guard defender, but did not get a lot of time on Brunson, and I just I think that's a spot the Lakers can upgrade in the rotation. Jackson, I was pretty surprised, didn't have the best couple of shifts, but I did not think there was this big of a gap where DA played almost 3 times as many minutes as Jackson. Jackson only played 12 minutes. I didn't agree with that. Then nobody else played outside of garbage time. In terms of stat of the night, we could go with Jake, Marcus, and Vando combining to shoot 4 for 20, which that was the game to some degree. But I actually think the fast break points here, where LA was outscored 16-7, which 16 for New York isn't crazy. That's not that high of a number, right? Like I would even say that's sort of a middling number. But the fact that they were +9 in fast break points and there were only 91 possessions, and LA is on the slower side with possessions, not to this degree, but I just felt like New York really dictated the pace. And looking at more stats of the night, like turnovers, it's pretty close. LA had 11, New York had 10. But New York really capitalized with a 19-10 advantage in points conceded off turnovers. So they had several pick sixes, especially in that third quarter, where simple entry passes to Luka or LeBron were tipped away by OG Anunoby or Josh Hart or Mikal Bridges, and that led to transition opportunities. So they did not have a high volume of transition opportunities, but they were very effective and efficient in their transition opportunities. And they only had 7 steals, but OG had 3, Cat had a couple, Bridges had 1. I guess Josh Hart didn't have one. He had that block on Rui. But I thought New York really controlled the pace and the flow and the rhythm of the game, which is something I thought LA was actually controlled it in the first half. But my concern going into halftime was it felt like LA should have been up by more. They're only up by 4, and then things completely collapsed in the third quarter. Then takeaway number 1 is the limitations with LA's newfound defensive aggression. So what I mean by this is the Lakers have been playing more aggressively lately, going back to last year's model of really loading up aggressively. They've been playing a lot of zone. They've also been trapping and blitzing more and playing more aggressive schemes that are opponent based. And I thought in the first half, they had some really good defensive stretches. They held the Knicks to 52 points, and the Knicks missed some good looks for sure. But I thought LA had looked better in the first half than the Knicks did. And JJ said after the game that they went zone 23 possessions in the first half, and the Knicks only generated 19 points on those. So anytime you are under a point per possession, that is great defensively. He did not share, though, what that was in the second half. And I would have to assume, because the Lakers ended up with, I believe, a 123 defensive rating. I would assume that number was at least 1.2 plus points per possession allowed in zone possessions. Their zone got carved up in that third quarter. Again, I didn't love them running it with the starters. I don't think, even with Jake and Marcus out there, I don't think it's the right personnel. Like, I don't think Luka, LeBron, and DA should be, I don't think that trio should be out there when you're running zone. So I thought they got picked apart. Then they brought in Rui for Jake. Then they continued to get picked apart, and they gave up, they allowed 38 points in that third quarter. But my thing with the defense is that when they're not generating steals and deflections, it's just open threes. It was target practice out there for the Knicks, but it's also drives and cuts on the weak side, right? So it wasn't just like they were splashing in threes. There was also several times guys were able to catch, and maybe someone from LA did make the wild late closeout. Then they attacked that, or there were times they just drove into open space, and then maybe that got LA in the blender. Then there was another driving kick opportunity, or sometimes it was driving for a layup. So I think overall the Lakers just don't have the athleticism, motor, discipline, or frankly basketball IQ to play as aggressively as they do against good offenses. So against middling offenses, against bad offenses, I think some of these things they've done schematically will work. But as we've seen, we saw it against Cleveland, we saw it against the Clippers, we saw it tonight against the Knicks. Those 3 offenses picked them apart and were able to, like, they did have the big second half, final 18-minute comeback against the Clippers, but like they weren't able to close that game out. And the Clippers were ultimately able to get either offensive rebounds or hit some big shots down the stretch of that game. And then we also saw that just the second half explosion from Cleveland, and then also the second half explosion from New York tonight. And it just feels like the Lakers can play that type of defense in doses, in stretches, but to sort of rely on the zone too much or trying to double or get the ball out of certain players' hands. I just don't think it's sustainable against the best offenses with high level coaching and adjustments, with a certain level of playmaking. Like I talked about it earlier in the trip, when they tried to, it was different trying to blitz against or play zone against Jamal Murray and James Harden compared to against like Scotty Barnes and Brandon Ingram, or against the point guardless Dallas Mavericks, right? There are levels to it in terms of the type of offense you can get away with that aggression against. And I just think LA's defense has trended in a slightly positive direction here on this road trip in general. But I think we are seeing some of the limitations with that and some of the gimmicky stuff. Ultimately, I just think they're probably better off playing more man and just switching, I guess. I mean, look, I don't have the answers for the defense because I don't know if they're saving the defense, but I know when they go zone and you're forcing guys to make certain reads and you're over helping in certain situations, it's just leading to a slew of wide open threes. And the Lakers are not going to, they're not a good enough shooting team to win a shootout like that, quite frankly. Like, they can every once in a blue moon, but it's not going to happen consistently against good teams. Takeaway number 2 is a quick one. AR injury update. So Austin went through, he was a game time decision, went through his pregame warm up, and he was immediately ruled out. It does sound like Brooklyn is in play, but obviously it's, JJ said he was going to return on the road trip. We are now 7 games into the road trip, so he has to play on Tuesday for JJ's proclamation to ring true. But he did. I mean, I watched his pregame warm up. I thought he looked good, but ultimately the Lakers are being cautious with it and careful, and just want to make sure he is 100% or as close to 100% as possible before returning. And then takeaway number 3 is trade deadline fallout. So since the last time we spoke, there have been a couple of trades. There was the DeAndre Hunter and Keon Ellis 3-team trade between Cleveland, Sacramento, and Chicago, which took off 2 of the players who had been linked to the Lakers the most over the last few weeks in DeAndre Hunter and Keon Ellis. I shared my reservations multiple times about trading for DeAndre Hunter and the potential framework of a Rui Dalton trade. So I think for the Lakers' sake, it's a good thing that he is off the board and they cannot trade for him or will not be trading for him. The Keon Ellis one, I think that one stung a little bit because I do think Keon Ellis was someone that could have really helped the Lakers. And even if he didn't, I said it earlier, I don't think a single move or player is necessarily going to change the Lakers' fortunes. But I think Keon Ellis could have been a player who fit in nicely with this group and had, become or would become a long-term piece with Luka and Austin. In terms of the deal itself, it was funny because there was the reported asking price from Sacramento of a first-round pick for Keon Ellis. There was all these teams interested in him. And then, frankly, I think they sell low on Keon Ellis. Like, they actually have to attach a second-round pick and use Keon Ellis to get off of the Dennis Schroeder and Dario Saric contracts. And I think from a positional standpoint, I get it to a degree with Sacramento in terms of, I think DeAndre Hunter is he balances out the roster and the rotation a little bit more, but I would rather have Keon Ellis straight up than DeAndre Hunter, regardless of the contract. That's before we even mentioned DeAndre Hunter's making $25 million next year. And they just their series of decisions and moves and, not extending Keon Ellis and then also signing Dennis Schroeder with their non-taxpayer MLE to then follow that up by signing Russ to a vet minimum contract. Just none of those moves made sense last summer, last offseason. And then they followed that up by having to attach Keon Ellis to get off of Dennis, which just made no sense. And Sacramento continues to make mind-boggling decisions. But again, they sold low on Keon Ellis. Like, it's one thing, okay, maybe you're not getting the first round pick, but you had to attach him as a sweetener into a deal to get off a contract you didn't want. And it just feels like I just don't know what Sacramento's doing. For Cleveland, it's a great deal. I think they get better. I think, again, Keon Ellis is just straight up better than DeAndre Hunter. And they get Garland insurance with Schroeder. And they also save over $40 million in luxury tax this year, and also set themselves up to save money next year. So I think that was a shrewd move by Cleveland. And then you also had the Portland-Atlanta trade with Vit Krejci ending up in Portland for a couple seconds. And what I want to note with this is I actually think that's kind of a bad sign for the Lakers and the market. Now, every trade is its own deal and negotiation, right? But the early trades can set the market to a degree. And while the Keon Ellis trade was a side of like, hey, these guys who aren't necessarily starters or starting level players that you're asking for a first round pick for, you're not getting a first round pick for them. Or who knows, maybe Sacramento could have, and they just didn't because they're Sacramento. The Krejci one, like, I like Krejci. He is shooting 42% on threes. He's a top 20% 3-point shooter, or top 20 3-point shooter in terms of percentage. But if Vit Krejci is going for 2 second-round picks, and the Portland, it's a 2027, and then I think it's a 2030 from a different team. Might be Miami. I don't remember off the top of my head. But like the Portland 2027 second might be, that could be late 30s, early 40s, like somewhere between, let's say, 38 and 45. It's like a decent second round projected pick. And then a future one, which you just don't really, it's too far out to really know the value of that. But in terms of how this impacts the Lakers, I do think if Krejci is going for 2 seconds, again, it's sort of apples to oranges, but that's not a great sign that the Lakers are going to get something great with their lone second round pick. And that's sort of what I've been trying to say when I see some of these mock trades that people send in, and it's like, well, let's just attach the second to Gabe and we're going to get this like stud player. And it's like, no, I think some of the like most of the players that are being mocked traded to the Lakers are better than Vit Krejci, and they're not going to go for 1 second round pick. So this is where, again, to close a loop on the big picture viewpoint here of like, LA has to decide what they want to trade and what the price is going to be. And I think if it really is just their expirings plus a second, they're going to be pretty disappointed in the potential return. And I don't think they're really going to have anything attractive realistically available to them. But with all that said, let's get into the Q&A. First one from Connor Phillips. Thank you for the super chat. Someone has to explain the third quarter issues. Makes zero sense. JJ was asked about it after the game, and he said he's not sure. He thought that the Cleveland game really embodied the third quarter struggles. But I mean, this has been an issue for this team at times this season. I thought it had gotten better until this recent stretch where they've really struggled. I thought it had gotten better, but going back like early in the season, and really in some of these, like I think about the Houston game, the Detroit game, like some of the bigger San Antonio, like some of the bigger losses earlier in the season, they also were like the third quarter is the separation point. And that's where typically team starters have been able to distance themselves from the Lakers starters. And I don't know if guys are just getting cold because it's also been a problem to start games too, right? And I think one of the easy, the low hanging fruit perspectives with this has been like the starters have typically not been good for most of the season. They have settled into this recent starting group that has been better, but it has been tailing off as DeAndre Ayton has not played as well. You had the big three starting group, which was a disaster, -20 net rating together. And then you had like right when LeBron came back, some of those groups worked, some of them didn't, but like they've had some pretty inconsistent play in first quarters and third quarters, in part, I think, due to the starters. I haven't checked it the last couple of games, but as of a couple games ago, they had a negative net rating in the first, second, and third quarters, and a positive net rating in the fourth quarter. So there's also this element of, I mean, we've seen it with this group. Like they don't always try the hardest. They're not always locked in. They're not always focused. And it does feel like they try their best when their back is against the wall and they have to make a run. And even tonight, we saw like they were down like once New York stretched it to around like 8-12. They were pretty consistently down 8-12. And then they went on like that little push or so with like 4 minutes left. And then New York responded and that was it. So I think part of it's a mentality thing. Part of it is just a lack of urgency, I think, too consistently from this group, but I'm not quite sure because I agree that it doesn't really make sense. Rude, thank you for the super chat. Nobody knows the plan, especially Mr. P. Assume you're saying Rob Pelinka here. I think there's a plan. I think the plan continues to be spinning things forward. And that's not a plan that I agree with because I think with the exception of the DFS Luka trade cycle, them sitting out the other trade cycles hasn't really led to anything. Like I guess you could argue them sitting out the 2023-24 season and the 2024 off season allowed them to trade, or save a first in not trade that for Luka, but like they still would have had a first to trade for Luka had they spent one of those first. So that I even reject that premise. I'm just trying to think about it, like the positive to it of, not trading D'Lo allowed them to trade D'Lo for DFS. So I guess you can make that argument as well. But ultimately that didn't net in a championship. That didn't even net in a first round victory. So while I like the DFS move and I thought it would like turning D'Lo in multiple seconds into that was a shrewd move, it ultimately, I mean, I guess if we keep pushing it forward, it allowed them to sign Marcus and Jake and DA this summer with the flexibility from letting DFS walk. But I mean, that doesn't seem to be trending in a championship, run either. So if the goal is win a championship, I think even, of course, the Luka trade exists in its own like reality and stratosphere. And that was just a fortuitous situation that was presented to them. They do deserve a lot of credit for the way they negotiated it, the way they handled it, keeping it under wraps, keeping Austin out of it, keeping the second first round pick out of it. Like certainly shrewd negotiation, but it was not on their whiteboard to execute that trade until it was brought to them, right? So even that was fortuitous to a degree. And so I would just argue that the current approach of standing pat, rolling over the assets, having these big plans in the future, it worked because the opposing GM really wanted their star player, their star big men, because defense wins championships apparently. And then that guy was fired in less than a year. So yeah, I think they might have to tweak the plan a little bit. And look, maybe they get Giannis this summer. And if they get Giannis, if they get a high level starter, a couple high level starters, I will change my tune and we will analyze that. But as things stand, it's like that feels like a pipe dream right now. Easy peasy. Thank you for the super chat. Jake and Rui ruin possessions consistently multiple times on the third and fourth. They got the kick out. Good look and pass it up. Also spend everything on Kessler and Watson. Would 25 and 30 million get close? For the last part of this, yes, I believe some combination of around 55 million would probably get you pretty close on Kessler and Watson. There still is a chance that either one or both teams match, depending on what Denver does with Cam Johnson and Christian Brown, and ultimately what direction Utah wants to go in, like how much they want to chase a potential, like they could theoretically be a play-in team next year or in that mix if they get another high draft pick and then they finally start to try to win games. But yeah, I mean, I agree. Like this is The one thing I'll give Marcus credit for is Marcus does not turn down open shots, or if he does, it's because he sees the swing pass for a better shot, and that's an instance he will do it. But Jake and Rui, I mean, especially Rui as a plus 40% shooter, from three straight seasons. Like anytime Rui's open, Rui should let it fly. And Jake, I think it is a little bit more context dependent, but he does pass up too many shots. And that has been something we've consistently talked about on here. So I agree. I think both guys can be more aggressive offensively. And with Jake, I don't know why it hasn't fallen at the level that he consistently has shot at, or at least shot at like the last couple of years. But it feels like he's due for some positive regression and or just regression. That is the technical correct term. But he did go through that, and then he just kind of gone through these slumps. I still think he's a net positive from the perspective of he's an above average defender, and especially on this team brings a certain level of defense and energy. The rebounding, typically the offensive rebound, the cutting, I thought had some nice passes tonight, but he needs to, especially given how limited the supporting cast is in general offensively. I mean, I think after you got the big three, well, Austin's out, you got DA, you got Rui. After that, there is a pretty big gap to Marcus or Jake, and I think Jake has an even higher ceiling than Marcus offensively, so they need more, and I think there's like an opening there for Jake to be a bigger offensive contributor. It's just not really how this has been playing out so far, or at least not consistently. Iman, thank you for the super chat. How much are LA's swaps worth in trades? It's a good question, and I think it depends on the year. So I believe I'm pulling up their swap. I mean, they pretty much have, so they could swap 2026, 2028, 2030, 2031, or 2032. If they swap one of the future firsts, they cannot trade that future first. So I think the one that would probably, I think the more recent swaps are like the soonest swaps are not going to have a lot of value. Like the Lakers are projected to be somewhere between the 22nd to 25th pick. I know this is a good draft, but you typically want like a top 20 pick ideally. So I think the 2026 and 2028 swaps don't have a lot of present value. 2030, 2031, and 2032, it just comes down to your confidence in LA's ability to build a sustainable contender around Luka, how Luka is going to age, whether LA can get another star in the mix, and how that player is potentially going to age. So I think there's certainly more value with the 2030, 31, and 32 picks. But again, if LA trades the 2031 pick, that limits their ability to trade the 2031 pick in at this deadline, but also in the summer, right? So I guess 2030 or 2032 would potentially would likely make more sense in a potential swap. But I mean, again, the thing I come back to with swaps is the premise of a swap is you are betting against the team. Like when teams are trying to trade with Phoenix during the whole KD Booker Beal era, the Clippers don't have their picks, so that's a different story. But like, it's like that type of team archetype where you're like, this team's not even good now, but like, I don't think they're going to be good in 2 years and 4 years. And obviously the Suns have sort of flipped that premise, but in general, you are betting against the team's future when you make a pick swap. And it's difficult to bet against the Lakers' future, at least for the next few years, right? Because they're going to have prime Luka. Theoretically, they're going to add some pieces around that and build a better fitting, more competent roster. And that should take them at least into 2030, if not beyond. So I think if I'm trading with the Lakers, I want the pick swaps as far out as possible. I push for that 2032 pick swap. But again, that does limit potentially LA's ability to trade that in the future, again, depending on how they go about moving the picks. But I would say that the recent ones don't have much value. They're probably similar to I mean, again, it depends on the team, right? Because if I'm OKC or San Antonio, they have more value to me because I think I'm going to be better than the Lakers, and I would rather have the Lakers pick. If I'm Brooklyn or Utah, it's not that appealing to me because I'm almost guaranteed to be worse than the Lakers for the foreseeable future. So I'm like, why would I why would I have this pick swap if I'm not going to get to use it? So like the goal of the pick swap is to bet against that team and to be confident that you will be better than them. So I think that really only applies like if I'm OKC, if I'm San Antonio, if I'm Houston, maybe Minnesota, like some of the younger teams at the top of the West, or Detroit, right? Maybe New York, Boston. It's got to be like some of the top teams that you're confident. But I don't see any of those teams trading with the Lakers. That's the problem, right? If you're talking about Lakers trading with Brooklyn, Lakers trading with Utah, like whatever, those teams, I don't see you have any confidence in, at least in the next few years, you being better than the Lakers. So it's tough to put an exact like value on it. I would say that the upcoming pick swaps, depending on the team, might even have less value than like a second round pick. If it's some of the future ones, those are probably good second round pick ish value. So again, it just really depends on, but like there is inherent risk in it, right? Like if the bottom falls out under you and you owe a pick swap, like, if things don't go right, and let's just say like Luka leaves in the future and all of a sudden you're rebuilding and you have a pick swap, like that's problematic. So it's tough to say in a vacuum. I think it really depends on the team and the context, but in general, especially the 2026 and 2028 ones, I don't think have a lot of value. Zach Wan, thank you for the super chat. Just ride the season. No realistic move could make major impact to challenge, but if a future player came through, then go for it. Second part, only Luka, AR, Jake as 7th or 8th man. Jackson as backup center are the only untouchables. And what is your position on LBJ's future on the Lakers? I agree to an extent, right? Like I'm a little bit more aggressive in nature in terms of making moves. I think it, like the DeAndre Hunter move was to me a perfect example of the wrong type of aggression, where like in theory you could make the argument he's better than Rui. I don't know if I'm willing to go that far. I think it's close, but like you could see where LA was potentially thinking about that, but I think that would have been ultimately a mistake. And I think it's a good thing for LA. It didn't play out that way. I still think if Herb Jones or Nick Claxton is gettable for a first round pick, I would trade that in a heartbeat. I think that's sort of in line with what you're talking about in terms of a potential future piece. I think Wiggins is a really interesting one because I know some people are for Wiggins, some people are against Wiggins. I do think Wiggins over the next at least couple years will have a certain level of value, and I think is pretty close to living up to his contract. I mean, maybe he's like slightly overpaid, but I don't think it's more than maybe a few million. That one is an interesting one because it's not as long-term or future focused as a Herb, as a Nick Claxton, but those guys might all just not be available. And then if those guys aren't available, then you get to the Iota Sumo and Sadiq Bey and Najee Marshall and like that level of player. I mean, I would not give up a first for any of those guys, but those guys also, I mean, they each have different contract situations, but I would be interested in that. So I think ideally, at a minimum, they upgrade the Gabe spot, and that I think should be like the minimum goal. But of course, like big picture, I think the goal would be to find a long-term starter or at least a long-term bench player who you're confident can fit with the group moving forward. Really the only untouchables for me would be Luka and Austin. I wouldn't even go as far as to say Jake or Jackson are untouchables. Like Jackson, I think he's got the relationship with Luka. He's going to be playing with him in Slovenia, but I think Jackson should sort of be dependent on what the starting center is capable of. And like they get Nick Claxton, I don't like Jackson as much just because I think there's a little bit too much redundancy there, and he's just a worse version of the starting center. I think you want a little bit of your starter and backup balancing each other better. But I mean, they're not trading Jackson. They're not trading Jake. So it's I've gone through the guys who are unlikely to be traded or basically won't be traded, unlikely to be traded, and then potentially could be traded. But I'm not against that strategy. I mean, it seems like that's the way it's going. I would be more aggressive depending on what's out there, but it just seems like it's a pretty difficult market right now. I just think, again, like if they're not putting Rui or the first on the table, then they are limiting their potential, assets or just trade partners. And then in terms of LeBron's position, I would say some of the recent stuff and some of the things people have been saying publicly and privately, I have shifted a little bit more toward, I think it's more likely he's just not on the roster next season. Not like a big shift, but I think, I've erred on the side of like, if there are three possibilities, possibility one is he is back with the Lakers. Possibility two is he retires. Possibility three is he's elsewhere. I have said that like overall, I think possibility 2 and 3 are collectively higher than possibility 1. Like it's more likely he's gone than not, whether it's retiring or playing elsewhere. But I had said like possibility 1 was still the biggest individual slice of the possibility pie. I think that is shifting, where I would say it's probably like the biggest slice for me would be playing somewhere else next season. And then it's probably close between Lakers and retiring. I guess I would go Lakers second, retiring third. But I do think I've thought and said it's more likely that he's either retired or elsewhere next season. But I think my shift has been slicing a little bit of the pie away from him being a Laker and more toward him being somewhere else. But it's still relatively close to like 33. So I would be lying if I said I knew how it was going to play out. I don't know. And I don't know if LeBron knows. All right. Peter, thank you for the super chat. 27.7 points per game, 2.1 steals, leads the NBA 50, 40, 94, leads NBA in steals per game. Not LeBron, but Kawhi Leonard, statistically biggest snub in NBA history. Also All-Star game at home. Yeah. Kawhi, I mean, I agree that Kawhi was the biggest snub. If we want to talk Kawhi versus LeBron head to head, I do agree that Kawhi's been better and has had a better season. I think you could make a case though that he's had a better season than Chet. He's had a better season than Devin Booker. Maybe there was one more player that Denny. I think he's had a better season than Denny. So I know people are focusing on the LeBron part of this, but I think more than half of the West All-Star reserves, you can make a case Kawhi has been better than this season. I do think Ant was a lock. I think Jamal Murray deserves it, especially for carrying the load when Jokic has been out. And I think KD was another guy who deserved it. But I know people are focusing on LeBron. I think you could make a case Kawhi over Chet, Kawhi over Book, Kawhi over Denny. You can also make a case for Kawhi over LeBron. I think LeBron just the way he's played the last month, I think was certainly all-star level. The way he started the season, of course, like missing the 14 games and then a bit of a slow start the first 5-6 games, that I think works against him to a degree. But I mean, he's LeBron, and I thought he was going to make the team, whether it was the official team or being a replacement or just them adding an extra spot. Like, I did not think there was a way LeBron was not going to be on the roster, whether you agree with that or not. But certainly I think Kawhi should have been on the roster over multiple players, right? So it's not, for me, it's not a LeBron specific thing. I also think Şengün should have been on the roster. So I did not agree fully with the West All-Star selections, but we'll see what happens with the replacements. Xavier, thank you for the super chat. If Rob doesn't make a trade, what does success look like for this team moving forward? Well, I would say it depends on what you mean, like this season or just like in general. Because of course, I think building a championship roster around Luka is success, and winning a championship with Luka is success. Now, I don't really see that in the cards this season. I'm not entirely writing it off because we still have only seen this group for 8 games together, or at least like the big 3 for 8 games together, and they're 5-3 in those games. Now, the starting group has been killed, and overall, the big three is almost a -10 net rating. So they got to figure that out. But I would say, for me, what I would consider a successful season, if they just don't do anything, would be making the second round, just because I think right now they probably would be, not even probably, I would say almost certainly would be round one underdogs. Again, like I think there's even scenarios in which they're the 3 or 4 seed and are still round one underdogs against. I think most people would pick, I mean, of course, OKC and Denver, but I think to a lesser extent, San Antonio, Houston, Minnesota, I think all those teams would be favored over LA as presently constructed. So I think them winning a round would be a success in terms of like overachieving. Of course, like conference finals, championship, that like you keep going up and it's more of a success. But I think if they stand pat and win a round, that would be like a successful season. But for the Lakers and for Lakers fans, it's still a failure because they want to win a championship. Like that is the goal. That is the standard. So I guess like through that binary lens, it's championship or bust. For me, in terms of like this group's realistic potential, I think winning a round would be a win. Zach Wan says, report says Sixers could trade, thank you for the super chat, could trade Oubre and Drummond for cap space since PG issue. So should we trade for them plus Grimes for Gabe and Maxey plus a lottery protected first? I'm glad you're saying lottery protected first here because I think that gets you in the ballpark. It might not even be enough, but I think it's closer. I've seen some people float a second for Grimes and Oubre. That's not happening. It's just not happening. Again, I said that earlier. I mean, I guess it comes down to your belief in Grimes with this group, right? Because he's going to be a free agent and he's expecting to make at least 15 plus million, if not 20 plus million. I have my reservations of a Luka, a Luka, Austin, Grimes trio. I don't think he is the ideal third perimeter player around Luka and Austin. I think if you're pivoting away from Austin and potentially flipping Austin at some point, that's a different conversation. And then you could talk me into Grimes taking on a larger offensive role. And like, maybe you're shifting toward, it's like, I don't know, if you get Giannis, right? Then you need other offense from other positions. And I think a Grimes makes more sense, but just Luka, Austin and Grimes together, I just don't think Grimes is good enough. I think that third spot needs to be a certain caliber of defender that I just don't think Grimes is. Offensively, I think it's a great fit. I think that trio, that's a great starting trio of two all-star. I mean, Luka's, all NBA first team MVP candidate, all-star level guy, and then a good, solid starting level player in Grimes. That's a pretty good trio. I just don't think he's the caliber of defender that the Lakers need ideally next to I think it needs to be the Herb Jones, Tamani Kamara, Jaden McDaniels, Lou Dort. Like I'm throwing out different player archetypes there, but like that caliber of defender, Grimes is multiple tiers below all those guys. So that's my one reservation with this is if you give up the first, you're sort of committing to Grimes. You don't trade a first for Grimes and just let him walk, right? Like that would be a mistake and a misuse of that pick. Like if you're giving up the first, it's got to be for a guy you view as a long-term piece. That I think that goes without saying. But I mean, Drummond, I think Jackson's better than Drummond. I know Drummond can rebound and specifically offense rebound better than him, but I would say it's close there, but I would lean Jackson for what the Lakers need. Like Drummond's not a lob threat. He's not going to finish or just have the same level of opportunity that Ayton or Hayes have offensively. I really like Oubre. I think he's an interesting player, especially like in a vacuum. If there's a way to just get Oubre, I like him. But I get the reporting on this. I also wonder though, like in a way, Grimes and Oubre become more important now that Paul George is out. If they dump those guys, I mean, it depends which direction Philly wants to go, but I think Philly has a puncher's chance to come out of the East. Like with the season Maxi's having, he's probably a second team All NBA guy. With the way Joel Embiid's been playing lately, and maybe Paul George is in bubble wrap for the next 25 games and like could actually make it to the playoffs healthy. I think the Sixers can make, like, the East is pretty wide open. If you told me the Sixers beat the Pistons or the Knicks in a playoff series, I would be like shocked by that. So I get the cap situation and why they might get off of some money, but I don't know. I think I'm probably out on this, but I know a lot of people are high on Grimes, so I'm sure some people are for this. I think if you're using your big bullet on Grimes, I don't think he's quite the level of player the Lakers need. I think they need a slightly bigger and better defensive piece. I like the offensive side, but again, I think, yeah, it's tough, right? Like you could argue he's worth that, but I view him more as a bench player with this group. Norma Maldonado Buha, aka Mama Buha. I know the losses are frustrating. I will give 10 memberships if we get 100 likes. It's free to like. Let's do it. I have no idea if we're at 100 likes right now or not, but hopefully we are. And my mom will gift some memberships. 10 man. Thank you for the super chat. What's Jared Allen's value for the Lakers? He just had 40 and 16. I did not know that. Jared Allen is 40 and 17 and 4 blocks tonight against Portland. Wow. I don't think the Lakers have enough to get Jared Allen. I think if, like, let's just say it's a framework of, I don't know I want to say he's making almost 30 million, around 30 million. If I'm not mistaken. Yeah, he's only making 20 this year. Then it goes up to 28, then 30, then 30.5. So at 20, I would assume they would want Ayton back just because they need a starting center, and Cleveland's been playing better lately. They are trending upward in the East. I think trading Jared Allen, and basically your season's over in terms of like contention. You're now going with Evan Mobley, I guess, at the 5, or I like Tomlin, but like I thought we saw in the Lakers game, there was a difference when Allen was on the floor than off of it. So I just don't think they have enough. And I mean, you could offer Rui. I mean, it's probably like Rui and Dalton in the first, and I don't even know if that really makes sense for Cleveland. So I know they got to figure out their situation. It helped with the Hunter trade, and they still have more moves to make, but Jared Allen is a good player, and I don't really think the Lakers have enough to get him. Logical Laker fan, thank you for the super chat. Crazy to imagine if we kept our OG core / picks, backcourt, JC, Zoe, D'Lo, Austin, front court, Caruso, Zoo, Randall, Kuz, BI, Josh Hart, plus picks to trade, #logical. Well, I've seen people float this before in terms of what if the baby Lakers stayed together. And my only thing with this, I mean, there's a lot of what ifs here in terms of what happens with Lonzo. Does Lonzo stay healthy in this alternate reality, or are we saying everyone's health is the same in terms of when they got injured, how they got injured, how many games they played, the surgeries they had, all that stuff, right? I don't know the answer to that. This is certainly a deep team, and there's a lot in the backcourt. You got, I think Austin has ascended to being the best. Like I think this season's version of Austin is better than D'Lo, Lonzo, or JC ever was. Then you have the front court guys. So I guess this full strength starting group would be something like Zoo, Randall, BI, Caruso, and Austin. I guess that's probably, I mean, you could argue Caruso or Josh Hart, either guy could fit as a starter or bench player. And then like, that's a pretty good team. I think the clear thing is like, they just don't have the number one guy. I think Julius Randle and BI are both two. Like, I think Julius is a legit number 2. I think BI is more of a 2.5 in terms of, I don't even know if you could win a championship with BI as your second best player. He might be like, he's somewhere in between a second and third best guy. I think Austin's probably in a similar boat. Probably number 3 best guy. And then you just go down the list and a lot of solid role players. But I think the one thing was like they never had like the true alpha top 10, even top 15 guy. And that's the one thing the baby Lakers were missing. Now, to your point, you still have picks and flexibility, and you could have made some trades along the way, and maybe they could have acquired that player with the picks and the young guys. But I think they did pretty well getting LeBron and AD and eventually Luka. I think it's been a lot of the peripheral moves where they have screwed things up. But yeah, it's a very interesting what if, and I know a lot of fans think and talk about it. So I just think ultimately they didn't like nail the guy, right? Like they didn't get, none of these guys turned out to be the guy. They turned out to, Randall and BI turned out to be really good players, but they're not like, we're leading you to a championship players. Andrew, thank you for the super chat. Does Mark have a say in what we do against to LA? Yes, he does have a say in what the Lakers do. Jeannie is, of course, the governor right now and the face of the franchise, but Mark does have the biggest seat at the table and does have a say in everything the Lakers are doing. As I've said multiple times on the show, my understanding is there will be bigger changes in the offseason in terms of restructuring certain things, hiring new people, bolstering the basketball operations, the business operations, everything. A lot of those changes are more so going to start in the offseason to not disrupt things. I know fans would love a new front office, new this, new that, but like when you're in the middle of a season, there's a level of continuity and it's just, it can be difficult to make some of those changes and those transitions mid-season. I guess we can look at, Denver, maybe they moved on from their front office. And those are like very extreme examples of Calvin Booth and Michael Malone, and they were able to go on a little bit of a run to close the season and then give OKC everything that they had in the second round. But typically you just don't see that type of change from, again, a team that's playing like they're good. They're just not like good enough yet. But I think most of the changes people want to see in terms of bolstering the front office and basketball ops will happen in the summer with a little bit more runway. Harry Chinani, thank you for the super chat. Exactly 1 year tomorrow since the Luka trade, and we are still a playing team. Can't beat good teams. It's a joke. Yeah, we are now officially past the Luka anniversary. I believe it was around 12:15 a.m. Eastern time. I was here in Madison Square Garden. I think I was staying at the same hotel, if I'm not mistaken. But I was actually at MSG when it happened. I've told the story a million times, so I don't want to repeat it, but was in the press room. It happened. We all started freaking out, making calls, texting people. I had to write a story immediately, came back, went live, talked to you guys, then went back, wrote another story, did more reporting, and was up all night. So I ended up doing like 3 stories plus going live, then went live again the next day, and then the next morning did the Ryan Russillo show. So it was a pretty crazy like 36 hours for me, because I was also flying back that day or like the following day. So the whole day was spent just working and doing the Luka trade. So yeah, no, it was good times, fun times, but a year later, there's still a lot of work to do with the roster. And to your point, I mean, yeah, I, as of right now, it's difficult to have confidence in them beating. Like, I was kind of hoping they'd beat the Clippers or the Cavs or the Knicks and prove me wrong. Remember, before the road trip, I said I thought they were going to go 5-3, and I said the Clippers, the Cavs, and the Knicks were the 3 teams I thought they were going to lose to, and it's sort of become predictable now of who they're going to lose to. John, John, thank you for the super chat. Lakers wasted 4 off seasons planning post LeBron. Agreed. Uh, Agreed. I think, I mean, we could go back 2020 offseason, which was very short. I think they made a mistake pivoting away from JaVale and Dwight and Danny Green for Marc Gasol, Montrezl Harrell, and Dennis Schroeder. I've argued that Marc Gasol was a better player and a better fit than people have often given him credit for. But that said, they did have that identity of the three-headed 7-foot monster. Technically, Dwight Howard's 6'9", 6'10", but 7-foot monsters of AD, JaVale, and Dwight, and the just size in the rotation where everyone was basically 6'4" and above outside of Rondo and Avery Bradley, but Avery Bradley wasn't in the bubble, and Rondo, played at times above. Like, he was a guy you could switch onto bigger players and he could hold his own. Even AC, Alex being 6'4", he can obviously guard up as well. So they just had this unique team where everyone was good defensively. There was a lot of athleticism, a lot of length, and a lot of defensive IQ. And they went away from that, right? And then the following offseason was even more mistakes with the Russ trade, the Caruso situation, the THT contract, and then 2022, it was just, I guess they did the Pat Bev trade. Then 2023 and 2024, they did nothing in the summer. Gabe Vincent, Taurean Prince. And then 2025, signed guys with exceptions. So, yeah, I mean, I think they have mismanaged most of the last few off seasons. Nala, thank you for the super chat. Almost every New York 3 came off zone, drop coverage, off-ball laziness, and bad gambles. Outside of Ayton, on-ball 1-on-1 was great all night. I agree. I think I'm glad you mentioned the drop, because they weren't only in there wasn't as much trapping and blitzing tonight. There were sometimes they did that a little bit against Brunson, but it was largely the zone that I had the issue with in terms of the 3-point generation. But the off ball, you could call it laziness. You could also call it awareness. You could call it decision making. Those are all parts of it. Bad gambles for steals. I agree, though. Like, lost. Maybe I could have touched on this a little bit more. I did think, again, in the first half, there were some pretty good defensive stretches. And I thought Marcus, Vando, and Jake all had some really good on-ball moments. I think, and to your point, it was largely outside of Ayton in terms of some of the switching and corralling guys. Like, there was some pretty good. I mean, Luka, they targeted Luka a lot. I thought he held up well in a lot of those switches. They were able to get downhill against him at times and then generate like driving kick opportunities, but that's not, that's partly on the Lakers rotations and whatnot, but it was just too many breakdowns and miscommunications. And to your point, some level of laziness and gambles. Then you follow it up. This group plays best in switch heavy schemes going back to last year. DA doesn't fit that. A legit center fixes so many defensive issues. I agree. And this is another argument for potentially trading for Nick Claxton. I think I'm still waffling on who I think is my top trade targets, and I'm planning on doing that show tomorrow evening, or I guess afternoon Pacific time. But I'm starting to lead Claxton as potentially my number one guy. I'm probably overall still leaning Herb, or Herb right now is my number one. But I'm going back and forth between those two, because I think Claxton would be such a great fit defensively with the ability to switch out onto guards and wings, also be a lob threat with Luka. I believe he's third in lob finishes over the past 3 years. So he would fit right there. Is not a Jackson Hayes level pogo stick, is not a DeAndre Ayton level catch radius or length, but he is bouncy, athletic, quick, and I think would excel and look great playing next to Luka. And to your point, defensively. But yeah, I agree. Like, I think mixing in some aggression, right? And we've seen, because I referenced Denver and the Clippers, they had their moments where they forced James Harden into turnovers. They shut down Jamal Murray in the second half. Against Toronto, like they can go zone or play more aggressively with the trapping and rotating at times. But in general, I agree with you. I think because they don't have the best personnel in terms of on-ball defense and containment, I think that them switching a lot has its merits. I would also argue that Gabe Vincent doesn't fit in this because Gabe Vincent becomes a target when he's in a switch-heavy scheme. So I think if they're going to play like that, they need to gear the roster more toward that. And I think that needs to be cutting out some of the players who can't switch as well, which would be DeAndre and Gabe. But also I think just overall some higher level defensive IQ players, I would say, in on the roster. Trucker Star, thank you for the super chat. LA's main problem is offensive consistency. Shamet outscored our whole bench, and he's on a vet minimum, losing on the margins. Yeah, I mean, from a supporting cast perspective, depending on how you want to classify some of the guys, I think it's fair to compare. Like from a star perspective, Luka and LeBron outplayed Jalen Brunson and Cat, right? Like Brunson did have 13 assists. He nearly had a triple double, but he went 4 for 15, 2 for 6 on threes, only shot 2 free throws, did not get to the free throw line. Like the Lakers held him in check. It was the other guys, the Ananobis and Harts and Shamits, and to a lesser degree, the Koliks, that they just outplayed the Lakers supporting cast straight up. And we saw the difference of a group with actual two-way players like OG Anunoby, Josh Hart, and Mikal Bridges are better two-way players than anybody on the Lakers, and it's frankly not close. But even a guy like Landry Shamet can come in, and like the Lakers don't really have, I guess Rui's the closest, right? Like Rui and Shamet are different players. Obviously, Rui's a better player, and he's bigger, and he's a better defender, and right, like it's not the best comparison per se, but like Landry Shamet just comes in, he's got a flamethrower. And like that's his NBA skill. Like the Lakers don't really have, even Rui is a little bit more dependent on you creating the opportunities for him, where Shamet, you see he's relocating all around the arc. He's running the baseline to the other side. He's constantly moving. He's more of a movement shooter in addition to being a catch and shoot guy. So, I mean, Kolik came in and ran the offense, like 8 points, 4 rebounds. I mean, 4 assists. Gabe had 8 points, but there's just a difference there in terms of effectiveness. I would say defense and playmaking. And yeah, so they played a smaller bench tonight, right? Like they only played 8 guys, technically 8.5 if you want to throw in Diawara. But yeah, their role players were better tonight. And in general, I would say their role players are better. Logical Lakers fan follows up and says, let them gel and grow together, a la OKC. Logical. The only thing, again, I would push back on is if you are drafting, I mean, Shea is just at a different level than anybody. Like, if we're comparing Shea to Randall and Ingram and Austin, it's just not close. I would even throw in, he's not been the same player this year, but I would argue that last year's version of J-Dub, I would still take over Randall. I would still take over BI. And then that's before we even mentioned Chet and the leaps that he's taken this year, where, I mean, Chet made the All-Star team over Julius Randle. And you could argue that was close, but like, I think you can make a case that if you were drafting from those two cores, you would potentially take OKC's 3 best players over anyone else from the baby Lakers, or, before you get to your first baby Lakers. So that, I think there's a little bit of a difference there where they had more blue chip top end talent. Blue chip's maybe the wrong word, because Lakers had blue chip talent, but it didn't materialize to, like, Lonzo and D'Lo did not become number 2 pick level players. BI and Randall, I guess I mean, even BI, it's a little close there in terms of, did he live up to being a number 2 pick? Randall, I believe, number 7 pick, if I'm not mistaken. That one, I think he was pretty good hit for a number 7 pick. But yeah, I mean, LA I don't think ended up having the same level of top end talent as OKC. Zachary, thank you for the super chat. Offer first for Watson with Denver, knowing they probably will lose him for nothing. I know they likely say no, but would you test to see if they bite? Yes, I would test to see if they bite. I would offer it for Watson. I would offer it for Cam Johnson. I would offer it for Christian Brown. I think Denver is in a position where they have to just ride this out and figure it out in the offseason. I think, to me, they're the second best team in the NBA, and I think there's a gap between them and whoever you want to put number 3. I think they have a real shot if they can get healthy at playoff time to beat OKC. I know tonight they ended up, I actually don't know who won. Yeah, they lost tonight by 10, but no Gordon, no Brown, no Cam Johnson. So they're missing 3 starters on the OKC side, no J-Dub and no Caruso. So both teams were not at full strength and missing some key pieces, but OKC won. I still think a full strength Denver can push them to at least 6 or 7, if not potentially win the series. So I just don't think Denver's going to trade. And honestly, if the price is an expiring plus a first, I think Denver can get that from other teams. Because like that's the other thing we have to factor in when we talk trades is it's like, okay, the Lakers can offer X, but can a team offer X plus something else that's a little bit better? Or if I'm Denver and a team can offer a similar level of first, but also not just be I'd rather trade with a lottery team. I'd rather trade Peyton Watson to a lottery team for an expiring plus a first than the Lakers for an expiring plus a first. So it's like you have to factor in the dynamics between the two teams, and you also have to factor in, can another team potentially match that offer, and would they potentially rather trade with that team? And I think if the offer is Rui and a first for Watson, I think there are other teams that could come in and be like, here's another expiring plus a first, maybe even throw in a second or something that outbids the Lakers. So that's where I think it's unrealistic that they get Watson or anyone from Denver, but I think it is worth trying. I think Watson's more realistic in the summer, obviously, but right now I don't see it. Trucker Star says Portland had 5 2027 second round picks and Reaves is out for the season. I think this is in relation to the Atlanta trade earlier. Yeah, I mean, it might mean nothing, right? I'm just reading the tea leaves here of if Krejci is going for 2 seconds, that I just think most like decent level role players go for 2+ seconds. Like that's kind of been the barometer. They might not go for first, but like if we're talking an Io, DeSumo, Keon Ellis, if Sacramento was competent, I think those guys are going for 2 or 3 seconds. I think that's sort of been the market correction. Not a first, but more so 2 to 3 seconds. So the Lakers just don't have that in their asset chest. But then they also, like, the one thing the Lakers could offer with the expirings is, hey, you don't want let's just use DeAndre Hunter, for example. You don't want to pay DeAndre Hunter next year. Here's Rui, so you get off that money, and that's the advantage that is the thing that LA is offering. But if they also don't want to take on money, now you're just let's swap expirings and I'll give you a second. Like that's not moving the needle. So, but that's also good asset management on Portland's side. Ryan Lucas, any truth to the DeMar smoke? Seems like a Rob move. I do not believe there is any truth to it. It is someone that they were interested in the past. If they trade for DeMar DeRozan, the sledgehammer I will have on this show, that would be something. That is the exact opposite of the type of player. Like, some people are going to say bring him off the bench in a certain role. Like, he's a minus defender that, I mean, if the Lakers really want to try and turn every game into a shootout, that would, and again, even getting to the salary, I mean, I guess you could get there sort of with Gabe, Maxey, and Dalton, some combination like that, but that would be a giant mistake in my opinion. Shout out to my mom for gifting 10 memberships. That was about 20 minutes ago, so shout out to her. Kristen Lee report that Hartenstein may be available this trade cycle, but expensive contract. Dort as well in the summer. Any chance at Kason Wallace in the offseason? Thank you for the super chat. I would say no chance at Wallace. I think to your point, it's more so it seems like they're going to have to pick between Hartenstein and Dort. If I were them, I would pick Hartenstein. We talked about this on Lakers Collective. I just think Hartenstein's tougher to replace, where they have so much perimeter firepower and you can just lean more on Wallace and Caruso. I think AJ Mitchell is a solid defender. J-Dub is someone who's been out for a while, who's a solid to good wing defender. I think they're going to be fine without Lu Dort. Like he is their best perimeter defender in some matchups, certainly. And I'm not trying to discount how good he is, but I think he's sort of the poster boy for when their offense really struggles and they're not making threes, they're not making shots, teams are packing the paint against them. Dort is typically the guy who's like 3 for 11, 3 for 12 in those instances. Hartenstein, I just think his IQ on both ends, his screening, the short roll playmaking, the playmaking in general around the elbows, the floater that he has, the rim protection, the rebounding. I just think he's a really unique player that there are not many, like he's almost like a bigger Sabonis who does not have the offensive, like the scoring and the shooting that Sabonis has, but he does have the DHO short roll playmaking, like the passing that Sabonis has, and like the rebounding, but then he's a much better defender. So it's almost like trading the offense of Sabonis into being a good defender. That's sort of how I view Hartenstein. And I just think he's a really good player that I think that player archetype's harder. Like now we're talking like Jalen Williams, right? Who I think he's fine as like probably a third string center, maybe a backup, but he's not replacing Hartenstein. But Wallace is a guy that they're going to want to keep. Like I think if I was ranking the guys I'd want to keep if I'm OKC, he's 4th for me behind the big 3. Don't sleep on Barry. Thank you for the super chat. Rob has robbed us all of seeing Braun have a shot at one last chip and wasting a season with Luka. The GMs just refuse to play fair with him. I can't speak to the that yet. I think we'll have to see the fallout of the deadline. I still think the Lakers are going to do something. I just think that it's probably going to be something small that disappoints people, or maybe some people talk themselves into, but in reality is going to just be a small move that doesn't really move the needle. If they do something big or prove me wrong, I think that's great news for LA. But I mean, certainly that has been a dynamic at times where people ask more of the Lakers, or you hear the asking price leaked from what they wanted from LA, or kind of almost using LA as leverage, right? Like I think teams clearly do that, including Cleveland. And then the price of a player ends up going, like you see what DeAndre Hunter went for. You see, well, actually DeAndre Hunter, you could argue went for more than, I mean, I don't know how Cleveland did that. Well, Sacramento is the answer, but then you see like what Keon Ellis actually went for, and you're like, okay, well, the Lakers sort of had to give it, had to give up a first for him, but then he goes as like a sweetener for a salary dump. But I think it's too like the autopsy. It's too early for that, right? We're not ready. Like, let's see what the Lakers do, but then we'll see what is the fallout from it. Keon Park, I missed the game. What happened? The best way to summarize it was the Lakers had I would say a solid first half. They were up 56-52, had some really good defensive stretches. They actually came out with pretty good urgency. Like in the first quarter, the ball was snapping, really good ball movement. I thought the defensive physicality off the ball, guys were engaged, they were active. I thought Jake and Marcus were pushing guys around in like a positive way. LA actually had 7 fouls, which to me was a good sign of how aggressive they were being in the first quarter. it went downhill in the second. They got outscored 25-23, went on a little run later in like they fell down, I think like 4 or so, went on a run to close the first half, but then complete dud in the third quarter, got outscored 38-26, lost the fourth quarter as well. And really it was, I think the thing that summarizes the game is Jake, Marcus, and Vando went 4 for 20, including 2 for 13 on threes. Like their role players didn't hit shots. Landry Shamet dropped 23, hit 6 threes. Knicks outshot them. They won the rebounding battle. They won the possession battle. They got out in transition more. It was just all around. I think the Knicks just outplayed them, outclassed them. Tuzwi, thank you for, I hope, probably butchered. I'm sorry. Thank you for the super chat. I like the idea of Claxton MPJ. Is that possible? Pretty much no. It's hard for LA unless they were trading LeBron, which he's not going to go to Brooklyn, and they're not going to trade him for those players. It's just the salary is off the top of my head. We're talking high 50s, even into the low 60s, and LA just doesn't. I mean, if you throw in Rui and Gabe and Maxi, that's around 40 million. You're still almost 20 million away from being in the ballpark. And they just, you could throw in Vando. All right, you're at 51 million. You're still not there. So yeah, LA just doesn't have the salaries to match for both those guys. Sarah Talks Ball, thank you for the super chat. How much of a factor was mental / physical fatigue? I think it was a factor. I mean, seventh game of an 8-game road trip. I think they've played something, I think like 14 games in like 24 days or something like that. That's a little bit off, but maybe 13 games in 24 days, something like that, where they've been playing, they've had multiple back-to-backs, they've been on the road, they've had a tougher schedule. It's been a tough stretch for LA, in addition to not having Austin, who you could argue has been their second best player this season. I think that's a factor. At the same time, like everyone's going through something at some point. The Lakers have had easier stretches of the season, right? Like coming off of the NBA Cup, and they've had stretches where they don't have as many games, or they have more time to practice or rest and recover. So this is just part of an 82 game season. So I don't want to use that as an excuse, but I do think it was a factor. And I did mention it in, my big picture takeaway that no Austin plus 7th game of an 8-game road trip right before the trade deadline as well. Maybe guys' minds are, 1-year anniversary of Lakers have a big win in New York. A couple guys get traded right after the game. Maybe that was weighing on some guys, was unlikely to happen again. But yeah, I think there's a lot of factors going on right now. But I also think if some of this stuff was more like one-off or more random, like if the Lakers were a good shooting team and they just had a bad shooting night, I think you could chalk it up more to some of this stuff. And again, there's always multiple factors. It's never like one reason or two reasons. I know people like to blame, it was this player's fault, it was JJ's fault, it was this or this. And it's like all these things come together to lead to a win or to a loss. So I agree. I think this was a factor. But these are also issues we've seen from this group on this road trip, throughout the season, throughout the last couple of months, as they've basically been a 500. I mean, they've been a 500 team for 2 months. Like at some point that kind of matters, right? And one thing I've shifted my thinking in, especially going back to last year, but I think this has been a trend for multiple years, has been, I personally weigh the results like post January 1st until the end of the regular season more than the results from like late October through December, just because at some point there is like a what have you done for me nature to a season where it's like, okay, the Lakers started 15-4, but they've been a 500 team since then, right? And we now have they've been a 500 team for a larger sample size than they were the 15-4 team. It's now been, that was a 19 game stretch. We're on game 48 So they had a 19 game stretch where they were 15-4. They've now had a 28 game stretch where they've been a 500 team. That's a little concerning. And again, like we're getting further and further from that 15-4 team. And at some point, if a month from now, if they're still 500 over like a 3-month stretch, we have to start just being like, all right, the 15-4 is gone. Like that's not the team that they are. This is the new reality that this is a 500-ish team, which obviously means like they're probably going to be in the play-in and probably losing round one. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm just saying like the way things are trending, obviously over the last 2 months has not been positive. So I guess to close the loop here, like I agree. I think it was a big factor tonight, but I think the fact that we saw a lot of the trends we've seen all season, that's where I give them some grace, but I don't give them a lot of grace just because I'm like, this is sort of who they've been, regardless of if the circumstances were in their favor or not, if that makes sense. Mac Roblox, thank you for the super chat. Why are the Lakers not playing Austin Reaves ever since he got injured and missed so many games? It's really hurt the team. They're relying on LeBron and Luka, and nobody else is good ball handlers. I mean, they're not like actively choosing not to play Austin. This is a medical decision that, sure, if tonight was a game 7 or game 1 of the playoffs, I think Austin would have pushed through it and played. But there's a big picture approach here in terms of, I mean, Austin's in a contract year, and you can't overlook that. When a guy's in a contract year, you do not want to be re-injured or potentially suffering a more, like, I'm not even going to say like the worst case scenario, but I think we know what the worst case scenario would be here, and that would be devastating, and that would be devastating for Austin and his contract and his future, and for the Lakers if that were to happen. So you got to be careful with the calf injury. We saw him come back, try to play through it and come back too early and re-aggravate it. We've seen other guys. I mean, Tyrese Halliburton, we saw what happened to him in the playoffs, and that was the playoffs. So it like made more sense for him to try to push through it. It's a really tough injury. And like Austin, I can confirm it is very much bothering him that he is not able to play right now. This is not a guy who's just like happily sitting out, and he wants to be out there, and he is. I mean, this is a guy who has played through injuries. He's playing through an injury last postseason, has played through injuries throughout the regular season, and just guts it out. He's largely been healthy and available for LA, or at least available, not healthy. But this is a different situation, I would say. Arno DeCapo, thank you for the super chat. Lakers Nation, don't get your hopes up. Lakers will not be making any moves. Plinka will waste prime Luka years like he did with Braun and AD. I mean, we'll see, right? But we'll have the answer in 60 hours. I think, again, something small, but I don't think you should get your hopes up for, or I don't think something small is worth getting your hopes up for, if that makes sense, right? Like even if they add in like a more optimistic outcome, a Sadiq Bey or an Iota Sumo or a Najee Marshall, someone like that helps, especially if it comes at the cost of Gabe or Maxi and just upgrading the rotation and the talent. But that doesn't vault them past OKC, for example, right? If you somehow got a Herb or Nick Claxton, I think that gets you into a higher tier in the West, and like, I think capable of making more noise. But I think they probably need to make a couple trades, a couple moves, or like a 3-team trade where they're getting multiple pieces. And that I'm more skeptical of, but I still think something small is probably going to happen. All right, I will go until the 2-hour mark. So we got 10 more minutes. MJ, thank you for the super chat. What would it take for the Lakers to dump Vando's salary in the offseason to expand the Lakers cap space even more? I think it depends on how he plays the rest of the season. He's got a couple more years left, which, I think he's been playing better lately. I would say since early December, he's been playing much better, but I think there is something to there are real offensive limitations in terms of the finishing, in terms of the shooting, in terms of the way you have to use him within your offense. And that is not really appealing to a lot of teams. Like every team wants the 3-and-D wing, and Vando is just frankly never going to be a 3-and-D wing. He's going to be a D but no 3 wing, right? And that just has a ceiling of, I mean, I think for the Lakers, they're going to eventually run into that ceiling at some point in the playoffs. But for most of the good teams, I don't think he'd be playing for them, frankly, just with his limitations. So I mean, right now, I think it would cost the first to get off of him. If he has a strong close to the rest of the season, maybe that price drops, but you're going to have to attach, I think, at least a couple seconds, if not potentially a first, to get off of him. Hans De Leon. Thank you for the super chat. Hey, Jovan, thoughts on defaulting to zone recently? When it works, it works. When it doesn't, it's ugly. That actually that's my exact, those are my exact thoughts on LA zone recently. When it's worked, it's looked good, and they're active and engaged, and they're wreaking havoc, getting deflections. When it doesn't, it's a layup and offensive rebound and 3-point line. Like I thought there was even, I think it was 102-94, and Mikal Bridges just flashes. I think that's actually right before DA got pulled, because Mikal Bridges just flashes into the middle of the paint. DA is the nearest guy, doesn't contest him, just wide open 10-foot jumper. And like the Lakers have just too many of those low effort mistake possessions with the zone, especially when they're going with more of the starters or just not. I think the zone has looked better when it's all like just all the size, right? Like going back to the Timmy, DeAndre, Vando, LeBron, Marcus. It's like you have your two best perimeter defenders in Vando and Marcus. DA is surrounded by a bunch of size and length. Timmy's protected in the zone. And LeBron, we've talked about, like plays better with the Banshees and when he's in a certain lineup configuration where everybody's going after it defensively. That's when we've seen that group dominate with they're just like everyone's arms are out and it's taking up the whole floor, and they're getting after it on the glass, and they're getting after it with their energy, going to it with Gabe out there or going to it with the starters. I just think that's where you see some of the limitations with the zone. So I think they've gone to it a little bit too frequently lately, especially against some of the better teams. And I just don't think it works against that level of competition. BC notes Ayton putting up much worse numbers than he did for Portland, let alone Phoenix. I mean, the numbers have been, if we actually pull up, and I don't, it's not going to have this or like tonight's results, but if you look at his splits by month, so the usage has gone down. He went from 6 games in October, so it's not the biggest sample size, but then 11 games in November, 10 in December, 15 in January. So somewhere between half to like even 1/3 of the sample of other months. But he's gone from 15-8 to 17-9 to 12-8.5 to 12-8.5. So he's pretty much stabilized at that 12-8.5. But a lot of that's carried by big performances against bad teams, subpar performances against good teams. It averages out. But his plus minus, for what it's worth, like -7 in October per game, +10 in November per game, and then -8.5 in December per game, -0.1 in January. So he's been a net negative in 3 of the 4 months. The true shooting percentage has dipped. His field goal percentage has been the big thing that's dipped. It went from 63 to 76 to 70 to 60. So his field goal percentage dipped from 6% from November to December, and then another 10% from December to January. So yeah, I mean, he's just trending in the wrong direction in every facet of the game. And I think a lot of the things have been exposed. Saving Soul asked what was Luka's plus minus tonight. He was minus 13, but the starters were all minus double figures. Luka actually had the second best among the starters. DA was ironically the best at minus 12, but the Lakers got waxed in that third quarter. Connor Phillips asked what my brother thinks LA should do at the deadline. I don't know. I haven't really talked to him about it. We've been talking about other stuff. Chuck Dangler, aka Fang Charlie. What's the rest of your plans for the road trip? How was New York today? Today was a chill day. I just went to the gym. I've been going to the gym with my brother, and then we went to go eat afterward. And then I slept in. I've been using some of this time to sleep a little bit before the madness of this week. So slept in today, went to the gym, and then went to get burgers, then went to the game. Tomorrow we'll be doing Lakers Collective. My whole time schedule, like my time zone stuff is all over the place right now, but Lakers Collective, they'll probably get up and do some work and go get a coffee. Lakers Collective, do more work on my trade target stuff, go live, then going to go out with my brother and a friend tomorrow night. And then Tuesday, sort of just on call right now, basically, in case the Lakers do anything. Might do, I'm staying in Soho, so might do a little bit of shopping. And then Tuesday night, go into Brooklyn for the game. Then Wednesday, I'm here until the evening. So we'll just basically be on call and drinking lots of coffee and get ready for an earth-shattering Gabe Vincent plus a second-round pick for a bench player trade. GS, what live streaming camera do I use? So at home, I use the Sony ZV-E10 with a Sigma 16mm f1.4 lens. Here, I'm using actually my iPhone. This is a continuity camera. It's pretty high quality. Looks almost like a mirrorless camera. So just connect your iPhone to your computer and use that as I think that's the cheapest way to go. Alma asked if I was disappointed Djokovic lost in the final. Yes, I was. Sarah asked if I've had any good pizza or bagels in New York. Not this trip. I've been keeping it to trying to eat relatively healthy and focusing on like meat and veggies and fruit. But I'm definitely overdue for a couple slices of pizza, and then I got a bagel spot out here, so I will be eating bad at some point. A lot of people are telling me to go to bed. I mean, I guess if you guys want me to go to bed, I can go to bed. Saving Soul, is it cold out? Yes, it's freezing. Like last night, I went out to a bar with my brother and his friends, and we ended up waiting in line for 40 minutes, which was probably not the smartest idea, but everyone collectively was saying like this is the coldest stretch of New York winter that they can remember. I mean, definitely the coldest of this season, but going back, like I checked it because we were out here this exact time last year, right? Because of the Knicks game and the timing of it. It was in the 30s last year around this time. It's consistently been under 10 during most of the day, and then it'll range between like 6 and 20 degrees, but a lot of the day it's been like under 15, if not under 10. So it's like dramatically colder right now than it was a year ago at this point. And I know, like, obviously not the only place, Midwest, East Coast, everyone's been dealing with this snowstorm and just the weather. It's been pretty brutal. Flacco Channel asks, when was the last time you got lab work done, and is everything okay? Am I I got people telling me to go to sleep. I got people asking me about lab work. I mean, am I exhibiting some concerning signs right now? I'm not sure what's going on. Where's the balance? Says January and February is always the worst. Yeah, it is. I just, as a reference point, like literally checking the day last year at this time, it was like the high was 35 when the high, I think, was like 14 or something. So it was like that yes, it was still cold last year when I was out here, but 35 and 14 are very different numbers. Tally Khalifa asks if I guess I got to get drug tested, but I don't know if I'll pass. All right, we're getting into it's been a while since we had like the wild questions on the show. We've typically kept it basketball. Connor Phillips asks if how does travel affect my hair care routine? Not at all. I bring all my stuff. I bring my sea salt spray. I bring my clays with me. Yes, I have multiple clays. And really the only thing is like I have a crappier blow dryer on the road, but gets the job done. You need a basic blow dryer. That's really it. But I do have my fancy schmancy one at home. Tally Khalifa, any other road games you're traveling to this season? So I've been to now Boston and going to be the 2 New York games. I'm going to travel for the playoffs. So that is something I'm locked in for. TBD on the rest of the season. I'm considering maybe like a day trip or like one night trip for, they got a Phoenix game, they got a Golden State game. Then I wanted to go to Miami. That's just because I like Miami. That's TBD. That I think that's in like mid-March. So a lot in flux right now in terms of potential travel schedule. Just weighing sort of the cost of it all. Like most road games, especially like the bigger cities, cost anywhere between like $1,000 to $1,500 overall for the entire trip, depending on how long you're out there. So I'm just trying to weigh that. But yeah, I expect to go to at least a couple more games, and then for sure travel throughout the playoffs, however long that goes. Got Arno De Capo. Thank you for the super chat. It says, no question, just want to give you your flowers. You're doing an amazing job. I appreciate that. And I'm overdue. Like there's things I want to change with the show in terms of probably going through the games a little bit quicker. I know I can go a little bit in depth at times, and I want to keep some of the game chatter to like 25 to 30 minutes. I consistently am at 40. Want to probably trim the shows overall to closer to an hour 30, but I appreciate that. I'm just more so like talking through the change it. Like when I hear this, I'm like, I still can be better. There's still different, things I could do, but I appreciate you giving me my flowers, and thank you. It means a lot. MJ, will you be going to All-Star game in LA? I'm actually not. I'll be at events and stuff. I'm not going to be at all of it. I'm actually, breaking news 2 hours into this podcast, I am leaning toward doing a meetup at some point. I have a Lakers media or LA media, NBA media like dinner thing on Friday, but either Saturday or Sunday I'm considering doing. It's been far too long since I've done a meetup, so we're overdue, and I want to do one. Saving Soul asks how old I am and says they're 53. I'm 33. Craig asks if I'm doing a draft special. Is this for the All-Star draft? Maybe I should. I'm doing a trade special. I'm going to be going live. I'm between going live at 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. Pacific time, and I'll be going live through the deadline. So kind of similar to what I did when free agency started. I went live for like the first 3 hours of free agency. I'm going to do that for the final 2 to 3 hours of the trade deadline. Suzui asks if the Giannis situation. Yes, the Giannis situation is holding up a lot of teams, because I think anywhere from like 8 to 10 teams think they have a shot, and including the Lakers, and that's holding up a lot of stuff right now. All right, I'm gonna wrap here. But appreciate you guys for rocking with me for over a couple of hours. I will be back later today. I'll be back in 16 to 18 hours to talk top 10 trade targets going into the final 48 hours or so of the trade deadline, the guys I'd be targeting potential trade offers for them, their strengths, their weaknesses, their fit, ranking them 1 through 10, similar to what I did last year. Last year, 2 days later, they traded for Luka. So maybe the Lakers will pull off a big trade after I rank a bunch of players. But appreciate you guys. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. Shout out to the chat. Shout out to the late night gang. I will talk to you all later today.